meeting to order. Dr. Diggin will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
She's not here. You started without.
We started without.
Oh, that's going to be your job from now on, not letting us start without Denise.
I know what they're doing. Give them a second.
They're going to be freaking out.
No.
They're preparing something. How funny. I looked at them. Let me put this on my calendar while I'm thinking. Any announcements? There they go. May 17th.
You go ahead and do this this will be a good time.
Wow.
She's got to call the roll so it's official, huh?
Yeah, but you go ahead and pass them out.
How awesome.
Thank you.
We have never been fed before since I've been here. This is amazing. Wow. Don't forget Dr. Deacon.
I'll waste away.
Who did I say you did? Smell it.
I think Pam deserves one.
Yep, you're good.
Man, that smells so good.
It smells delicious. They're both there. I don't think I know. They'll want their food.
They're just invisible.
Just set it right there by her computer. Right back. That's always the way it goes.
Just give it to somebody else.
We got to wait for Denise.
Well, we have four tech gentlemen. Hey, Steve.
Yep.
Steve. We have four. We have four gentlemen at the computers.
We actually have 5.
AJ didn't count.
Oh, why not?
I was thinking sitting at the table, yes. You have mine, AJ.
He doesn't want one, so they're good. But you notice who remembered you, AJ.
Yes.
You're good.
One more.
That looks like something that a real...
See, the president has to dance, didn't have time to kill.
You do.
Oh, yeah.
At least they didn't ask us to sing.
Well, yeah, you probably want me to sing instead of dance.
Okay.
Unless you just want to laugh a lot.
Yeah, I can't dance or sing.
So, Lynn, if you want to take the roll, we'll go ahead and have Ms. Roca's presentation.
Ms. Bonfelter?
Here.
Ms. Nyworth?
Here.
Dr. Bridges?
Here.
Mr. Jester?
Here.
Colonel Curtis?
Here.
Ms. Edwards?
Here.
Okay. Special guests?
Well, under item 4, special guests, as everybody can see, it's a little different presentation today, but about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I'm looking at you, Ms. Roca. They took over my office kitchen and did some filming, and we had a lot of people in there. And what happened is, as a result of that, and a result of entering competition, we have our first ever, as a matter of fact, not only Lawton's first ever, but the entire state of Oklahoma, the first ever national winner for the Sodexo's Future Chefs competition.
All right.
So Mr. Dyer and Jalissa and your parents, I don't know what you have planned. It's up to you.
Basically, I thank you for giving my introduction, so it was really good. Last year we did have a regional winner from Crosby Park, and this year I'm just so thrilled to tell you that we have a national winner from Pioneer Park. So fascinating. Today, I'm going to keep it really short. I just want to tell you that Our LPS communications department did such a fantastic job of producing videos and helping us get the word out. I also want to thank our child nutrition team. Ms. Barbara Snow, who you just saw, has been instrumental in trying to, for the last several years, of making this competition happen. And it's just a wonderful opportunity for the kids to showcase their skills. So tonight, I just want to introduce to you Ms. Julissa Rocha, and she is from Pioneer Park. So. If we could, I'd like to show you some pictures on the slides there so you can see what the competition looked like. If that food doesn't look appetizing, I don't know what does. It's pretty awesome.
They're on behind you right now.
Yes, perfect.
Well, this is delicious.
Thank you. This is our first time to do that, and anyhow, we just appreciate you accommodating us. And also, you should have received in your packet a cookbook of the whole entire presentation, all the recipes from the contestants, and I'm going to let Ms. Julissa say a few words if she'd like to. It's not required.
I just want to say thank you to everyone that was supporting me and has voted for me. I couldn't have done it without you guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We want to thank the entire county of Lawton and Fort Sill, I guess military around the world. Dad's very active in Fort Sill community, and it's been a huge help. So if Mom and Dad, if you would come up.
I was going to ask her what her motivation was behind this dish. What made you want to cook what you cooked?
It made me want to cook this because I like cooking, and cooking makes me happy.
That's awesome. And it's an Asian chicken?
Asian chicken lettuce wraps with tofu caprese skewers.
Wow.
Very heart healthy.
Yeah.
Great job.
She answered my question.
Would you guys like to come up and get a picture?
I live on lettuce wraps these days.
Put the screen sort of in the background. Thank you very much. Again, thank everyone for allowing us to do this, and we hope you enjoyed it.
Continue this tradition.
Excellent. Perfect. There will be a all-school assembly on the 22nd of May at Pioneer Park at 10 a.m., and Julissa will be awarded her prizes at that time. At the moment, they have not disclosed everything that she will receive, so it will be a very big surprise. We will also have chefs there that will prepare samples again for the whole entire student body to try.
Oh, wow.
So.
Can I ask you a question? I saw a commercial where Lawton's doing something with the kids. Are y'all involved in that in any way, or is that something totally different?
It is not associated with child nutrition department, but we would, gladly help in any way.
I thought that was a pretty neat thing, and I just wondered if it had stemmed off of what we were doing, what y'all were doing in our school system with the kids, if it had kind of stemmed from that, so.
Absolutely. It was a great event, or it should be, yes. Thank you.
Mr. Dyer, would you share with the board while you're up, you had some recent grants that you got for child nutrition. Will you share us about that?
I did. We received word just a couple of weeks ago that through a grant that our department, myself and Verna Alger, had applied for, we applied for every school in our district that was eligible. 3 of the schools will receive steamers in excess of $25,000 worth of gifts from the USDA in the state of Oklahoma, and we'll have a brand new steamer this next year in Lawton High School, Tomlinson Middle School, and Ridgecrest Elementary.
Awesome.
All right. Free of charge.
Thank you. And Julissa, Mr. Rocha, if you would like, you may stay, but if you would like also, you may go. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Impressive.
Congratulations. All right, we're ready for departmental reports.
Under departmental reports, we have item 5A, which is an information item, which is just the printed out business services and educational services updates. And if the board doesn't have any questions over that, I'll move on to 5B. 5B is also an information item, and this is an update from Transportation Department. And I don't know if everybody, time flies, but this will be starting our 3rd year, I believe, that we've had LATS passes available to our students, and it will be our next year will be our 2nd year upcoming, where I believe we've had LATS passes available to staff members. And so, to present with that, we have Mr. Cook and Mr. Ryan Landers.
Good evening. I won't take up too much of your time. I just kind of going on the fact that, yes, this has been our first full year of providing transportation for all LPS students, grades 6 through 12, and it's been a huge success. As the statistics in front of you, you can kind of see just from the first 6 months to the next 6 months, we saw a 13% increase, which on paper doesn't seem like a lot, but it actually is a lot of ridership. And over the last couple of months this year, what we've started to see is students not only riding to get to and from school, but using it on the weekends, using it for other activities. And the biggest pleasant surprise that we saw were the staff. I think staff using transportation that's provided, and I think that's going to definitely increase with the more, the more information that we actually give out. And just to kind of go into what we have planned for LATS in the future, we have some really good kind of bus tracking technologies that we're going to bring to the routes, hopefully in the fall, that will make it a lot easier for the students and the staff to actually get to and from and pretty much know where the bus is at all times, which goes into the parents feeling a little bit assured of where the bus is and where their child is. So I'm here to answer any other questions if you have.
So that'll be an app of some sort?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're actually building right now, and we're hoping to have something like that in hopefully the fall.
That's great.
Yeah.
I don't remember what our numbers were for last year, what we were wanting to average per month. Do you remember what that was? And are we hitting it?
I can't say offhand, but I would say we're hitting it.
Okay. Can that something we can look at for the next meeting to see how we're doing?
Sure.
Compared to what we were?
Just something to compare us between the
Yeah.
Just to see what our growth is and if we're hitting what we wanted to hit and what we're projecting. Okay.
Would you like it as a board item or me just to update you after the meeting?
Well, as long as we're not voting on anything, then we just.
I can just do it informational.
Just do it for everyone in the board, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
All right, thanks.
All right, on item 5C, we have an action item, which is business services, proposed revisions to policy CFBB. This was tabled from the last board meeting, and I think we had some meetings, and I think it is, and Ms. Ellis is here if we have any questions.
What did we
met
table for?
met with them to get some clarification,
Okay,
and we're good to go now.
So nothing got changed from what you did?
Well, a little bit, but it's what's theirs.
Missing the last meeting, I told you I didn't.
That's right. And I'll move for approval. Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ms.
Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
All right, item 5D was again another item that was tabled from last board meeting, proposed revisions to policy CFBB-E1. This is the application for sanctioning of parent organization to booster clubs.
It's along with the other. Move for approval. Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Item 5E is a similar policy, proposed revisions to policy CN-R1, school transportation. Actually, this was not held over from the last board meeting.
I didn't
This
recognize
makes, this policy is just a simple update. There are two things within the policy that we had previously never updated, and those are transportation to childcare and transportation to kindergarten. Kindergarten students are now transported, it's as with everybody else.
They don't need to be broken out.
Right, so it's really just an update to reflect our policy. It should have probably been updated in the past, and so it's just an update to reflect current policy, current practice, I'm sorry.
Okay.
for approval.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Second. Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
All right. Now Kathy, I didn't miss any of those, did I? Nope.
No.
Okay. Item 5G, this is a proposed title. There I did. Just as Thank you. Item 5F is proposed revisions to policy GK-E1, request for use of school property. This one was actually held over from last board meeting.
Right, and and was that because we wanted to change, there was something I actually should have pulled on this one, just to ask the question. I noticed. Was this so we could do the number of custodians and that amount? Was that why that was held over?
These were all held over together just to make sure that we had all the information and concerns addressed by booster clubs before we brought it back to the board.
PTA met with them on this one, too.
This was in that same lump with the other
And what
ones.
did you add to this?
We didn't.
You didn't add anything, so all the
No, this is
LPS,
clarification. Yeah.
and everything was all, nothing was changed?
Yeah, this
Okay.
one we were fine with last time.
I couldn't see anything,
It got
and that was
pulled.
why I wondered.
Yeah,
what
no,
was
it's,
going on.
it's the same as last time,
Okay.
so.
Move for approval.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
All right, now we're going to go to 5G, which is proposed Title VI Indian Education Summer Program and Budget. And Ms. Brandstetter is here if you have any questions.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
All right. Under item 6, we have the architect's report. Did I just take your thunder?
You did, but that's
All right.
okay. You're doing well.
I didn't know where I was a minute ago. After you, Mr. Jester.
Architect's report. I guess we have Corey Miller. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to come tonight and give a brief summary of where we're at with the projects for the 2017 bond issue. Safe rooms, those 7 first safe rooms that will go out to bid actually advertised April 26th to local papers and regional plan rooms. We've already seen a lot of interest for that, and we'll be hosting site visits for potential bidders on May 10th at all the locations. We'll be accepting bids up until May 17th, where we'll open them, and we should have a guaranteed maximum price amendment to recommend for a board meeting as soon as June 4th. I'll be back on May 17th for a design presentation on the middle school, but I just wanted to give you an update also on the process there. We last met with the district design team on April 10th for a 65% review that included going over the estimate, and things are on track there. We'll be planning groundbreaking ceremonies for May 22nd there on site. And then on May 29th, we will be at 95% design and be ready to review with the district at that time. Some of the things we've been looking over recently, really vetting the foundation recommendations, and we've met with some community members there, and want to make sure that we've vetted all the concerns there. We've got a meeting planned tomorrow with the city to look at some of the public works. They've got a project on Gore and 52nd Street, I'm sure, as all of you know, and they seem very willing to help out with some of the infrastructure needed for our project. So some really good news there. Over the next week or so before we meet on the 17th, I'm going to sit down with the site staff and then the district staff and review our recommendations for things like the building's primary power, how that's brought onto site, stage lighting, curtain design, the electrical and data receptacle locations, finished materials, just kind of all those nit and gritty little things. So, are there any questions for me at this time? All right, well, we look forward to seeing you again on the 17th.
Thank you.
One thing I think the board members all have in front of you is there is a schedule of all the groundbreakings. I just want to make sure,
I think we had it in the other room. I don't know if we have the groundbreakings in here.
oh, I left it in the other room.
Yeah. We signed up.
Okay, good.
Signed up.
All right, that's it. That was all I want to make sure they do. Corey.
All right, well, if you need anything else, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey.
Okay, item 7, report of the superintendent.
All right, under the report of superintendent, item 7A is our biannual, which in this case means twice a year, not every 2 years. Report from the Bond Oversight Committee. Members present in the meeting were Dr. Todd Bridges, Arlene Cudd, who represents Peel, Kimber Downey, John Dunaway, David Hale, Scott Hatch, Brian Henry, Hossein Moini, John Neighborhouse, Patty Nyworth, and Emmanuel Nunez, as well as Diane Brenstetter and myself. The Bond Oversight Committee, this was the first committee meeting we've had where they could actually act. At the last meeting, Diane Brenstetter mentioned we had just received bond funds on March 29th. The meeting was supposed to be April 3rd, so the report did not include that information. But since that time, we were actually be able to update them on progress of the bond, about the safe rooms, the 95% review for the Eisenhower Middle School, and also the progress on Lawton High windows, Carriage Hill roof, Tomlinson Middle School. All those things were just in kind of beginning stages. MacArthur High School cafeteria bids, which were just received. So this was probably one of, in the whole history of the Bond Oversight Committee, this was probably the most, the fullest committee meeting. I am pleased to say that the committee approved my report. They were fairly easy on me, but it says the committee is pleased to report current and planned expenditures meet the provisions as outlined in the ballot, and the intent of the funds is communicated by the school board. They had 2 questions they wanted me to look for, to clarify for them. One, would there be an engineer on site for constant testing of the soil during the process? And we had the architect here, and Ms. Nyworth asked him that question.
But I don't know that he said that the engineer was going to be there. I thought he said they were going to do daily testing.
Yeah, but you can clarify with me.
No,
I did say engineer when I said that, when I asked him.
But I was just wondering, when he responded, did he actually say engineer?
What tests are they going to do in
What
the
are we
office,
testing?
basically?
The soil.
So the settling.
Compaction.
For some reason, people are.
Yeah, let's clarify. I'm not sure he answered what she asked.
I'll get an email.
Yeah, he can email him and make.
The other question they had is we had just received a payment from the 2014 bond that had not been tied to a project, and they wanted to know what that was going to be used for. And one of the reasons we didn't have it tied to the project is originally textbooks were going to be a huge portion of that, but we're at this point, I don't know if I'm sure everybody in the crowd, I'm not sure everybody realizes, but we're ordering 3 rounds of textbooks this year. Wow. Math, social studies, and science, which will catch us up with our core subjects. And we're just not exactly sure how much of the bond money we'll use toward the textbooks, because we did use a substantial portion last year. And so told them by November we would definitely know where those funds were going to be used.
Can I ask a question along with the textbooks that may be more appropriate for Mrs. Polk to answer, but I think it's along this line? We had looked at one time when we had discussed about the e-books and stuff where they're doing. Are we still doing that? Do we still have a committee that does that?
In the high schools, and I'm not sure where they're going, and Dr. Polk can share, and we also have Teresa Jackson here.
Okay. I just know I had spoke to Mrs. Polk about it.
They haven't given me a recommendation.
So that it's not, we at this current time, we're not prepared to go completely e-book.
Right, I mean,
So,
in any subject?
no,
Okay.
because that e-book would be for an entire system. So
Right.
what we're looking at is a blend, so it's not completely the textbook, but it will be components. And Ms. Jackson, who is actually going to be doing the ordering,
Okay.
can kind of reiterate that.
Every book that we purchase has an e-book with it.
Okay.
All the companies are going that way, so the
Okay.
student has an opportunity for, in their hand, or at home, or in the computer, or
Okay.
iPhone, or whatever.
So they can check out they can go ebook if they prefer.
Yes.
So doesn't the ebook gives us I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overtalk you, I'm sorry. Doesn't the ebook also give us the opportunity for like information that comes in later like, you know, for
They're
different
updated,
things?
anytime there's an update, they're automatically updated. But they have the paper textbook as well as the electronic.
Okay,
And
all
then
right.
they have all the resources that go along with it as well, webinars or videos or.
Okay. I knew we had discussed it earlier, and I had been curious about where we were.
And if, on that subject, just remember, last year, we tried an option with math that was more of a resource digital model. It worked really well with the resources that we bought, but the digital resource did not work out. It did not really meet what the math teachers were expecting.
Okay.
That's one reason this year we're revisiting that. We didn't lose any, we lost a little time, but the resources that we actually purchased are still being used in the classrooms, but the textbook option this year has turned out to be a better option than what we, that's one of the lessons we learned.
Right, exactly. Not everything.
Didn't
we
waste
wanna
any
try
money,
works.
just a little bit of time trying something different.
That's good.
So the new books that we're getting, they're class sets or they're for each individual student gets?
Depends by grade level. I don't think we've determined 100%, Ms. Jackson. I apologize.
We're looking at enrollment, but we haven't, we're waiting on quotes, we're not quite there yet. It's, you know, we're the company's mercy, basically. So once we get all of the quotes in, then we'll discuss that we're looking at enrollment purchase.
Okay. Do we give kids the opportunity, if they don't have their own book, it's a class set, can the parent opt to buy the book for the child that they need to? Is that an option?
I don't know if we've ever had the question.
I mean, I think that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just know with my own son in math, like that's a struggle, and we use Google a lot because there's not a book to take home, and
Well,
I'd buy
that's the
one.
beauty of having it online. too.
Yeah,
You've got
for
to
sure.
do that now, so.
Okay.
So will the ebook work for you on something
Yeah,
like that? Would you
for
like
sure.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have an online one next year. And one of the things in our, we determined that well over half of our students have a device, either a pad or a laptop that they can access ebooks from.
Yep.
And so that's all part of this progression toward some digital options.
What's the cost? I know Microsoft and Apple both do some specials for education, obviously, but what's the average cost of a device per child?
They told me at that we
Mr.
went to about $300.
Mr. Watson, I've got a snack for you. I didn't get you one earlier. Now I'm going to be nice to you. It's like, Mr. Watson, do you have an idea how much, like a Chromebook, what is a Chromebook?
Chromebooks like you all use in this meeting, that's what we've been getting for most of the students. They run right around $250 with accidental projection.
That's good.
And I don't know of anything that can access the materials that would be provided with the textbooks.
I went to a Microsoft, I went to an Apple one, I'm sorry. I went to an Apple one. Of course, you know, they're trying to sell you Apple. And they were like, well, we can beat their price. And I'm like,
Yeah, I think Apple's trying to get in the game on that.
I would too.
In spite of Apple can beat any price.
Exactly.
That's great.
Yeah.
Any questions for the board? Further questions on the Bond Oversight Committee report?
So our answer to the second question was, we're looking at what we're going to spend it
He's
on?
going to let them know.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just got the money just a few weeks ago. We have not been able to assign it to a project yet.
Okay.
But they get monthly reports, and so when that is finally assigned, I'll just note in our monthly report
Okay.
that we got it. All right. Under item 7B, discussion regarding district policy governing requests for proposal. I did send the board kind of an outliner of ideas that were under consideration. I've been trying to keep my documents to one sheet, keep things simple. In the document, what I did is outlined our current thresholds for bids and quotes that are covered under policy. In constructions and repairs, they're $25,000. Under that can be negotiated. Anything less than 50, from 25,000 to 50, have to have bids, but anything over 50 has to have a sealed bid. And when it comes to purchasing supplies and materials, any single item, $750 to $74.99 requires 3 written quotes, and then items of $7,500 or more required sealed bidding required from the purchasing department. I provided those to give the board kind of a perspective on what are other thresholds in other areas. If we were to formulate a policy for requests for proposals, kind of given an idea of what kind of expectations we already have. If a service, for example, was going to be $50,000, and it had been a service, a repair or a construction item, we would know what we would do with that. I just wanted to be able to give the board some perspective. In the end, and one thing I tried to outline in the narrative was the hope, what I think this is evolving to is just to ensure that when we have this threshold, it may not be the term request for proposals, it may be request for quote, but that we have some sort of competitive, documented, repeatable process that the board can say, okay, we know this had been, that there was a competitive process before we received this. And I think that would be part of our board process for the board to know this did, participate. This is the process that happened. But I tried to give the board some information, some ideas that are under consideration, but at the end I will just step back, and I'd like to, this is an opportunity for the board to discuss what you think this policy should look like, the thresholds, and any other considerations that may not have been considered by staff at this point.
My first question is, who makes sure that we do hit the RFPs, that we do this? When a contract comes, we might not actually know the price, so we're going to have to determine, somebody's going to have to determine that it fell in this category.
I think that'll fall on the department head responsibility, and okay. The final, there'll be 2 more or 3 more layers of oversight there. One would be getting it into the agenda. The third would be myself, but then the fourth would be the board, knowing clearly it needs to be noted. This, okay. Once we have that in the policy, nothing should be able
to get past.
The board knows that at any time, any item that's in there above set, you could ask for those quotes if you ever needed to, any bid. And I think there'd be 3 or 4 levels there if we enact this policy.
And then my only other question was, and then I'll let somebody else have a question, but is $25,000, is that low enough, or is that standard?
I didn't really, I just put that as perspective. I'm not sure what the threshold would be. I wanted to hear from the board before we really engage staff too much on the specifics.
Okay.
That's what it is for construction repairs. It's less than 25 can be negotiated, less than 50, between 25 and 50 has to have a bid, and more than 50 sealed bids. But certain goods and services, we don't have to do RFPs or bids.
Right.
And that's what we need to decide is what the threshold would be at which we want to make sure that an RFP is requested, just to make sure that, number one, we're getting things done as competitively as possible. It also gives an opportunity for alternative ideas and methods and different goods to be considered.
Definitely.
Well, and it makes it more inclusive, especially for local vendors.
Correct.
To be able to really see what they need to do to become part of the process.
So what is your thought?
Well, I think that in this particular case, the number doesn't have to be as low as $25,000. It could probably be closer to the $50,000 range, but that's just my thoughts. I mean, it doesn't do any harm. It's just that sometimes there are some goods and services that are ongoing and recurring that, it could make it cumbersome to have to do an RFP every year. So we need to figure out which, what price range within that effort becomes, always in the best interest of the district. I'm not sure what that number is. We might need a little more input from purchasing and from our different department heads as to.
I think so, because I want to make sure that we know, our schools are different. Schools are different than what a regular construction company would deal with. So I do want to make sure that we're not overburdening ourselves, but also that we're not.
And these are really non-construction issues. And I did meet with Sheila Ralph over purchasing, and Ms. Ellis previewed this. And one of the considerations Ms. Ralph is really this is not something that purchasing department can manage. She may not, for example, if AJ is doing an RFP for a technology service or system, she's not going to know. That's why this sort of process would have to stay within the department.
Okay.
They could assist, but it really has to become the department's responsibility because RFPs are so specific. A few years ago we did one for security.
Right.
That's something that the people involved had to be knowledgeable of. And so that was her main concern. So From there, what I think the next step, what we would do is, I'll probably engage my executive team and Ms. Ellis through some more conversations. And I think we can have a draft policy at the next board meeting.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm thinking some departments could get really overburdened with something like this.
What I think we're leaning toward at the moment is making sure that if an expense maybe has 3 or 4 criteria, if it is over this price, or it impacts all students or multiple sites, and/or it impacts all staff or multiple sites, then we need to have some sort of documented, repeatable, competitive process that can be evidenced before a recommendation can be brought to the board. That would fall the burden on the supervisors, and then, of course, me to make sure before we got it to the board, I could say, okay, how did we come up with this? And like Mr. Jester said, some things don't work that way, but some things lend themselves very well to this process. And I think the final kind of point of information for the board would be, anytime we have something over a certain amount, I just need to be able to note in my rationale to the board, or the board notes, or maybe on an agenda, this was subject to an RFP process, those sorts of things. Those are things we haven't really completely worked through, but I wanted to hear from the board first.
Yeah, because I can see that there could be some exclusions on an RFP where we would say, you know, the reason this may not fit into this little certain criteria, but this is the reason that it didn't meet the standard, right?
Yep, and I think if we have staff, anytime they make that decision, that has to be something that has to be documented just as copiously as if we had done an RFP process.
Right.
In this case, we did not do this because, for these reasons.
Yeah.
And staff, occasionally, there come situations where the staff has to be able to say, this is one time where either time, circumstances, we really had to make a decision.
Right.
And I think in those times, it just needs to have full disclosure to the board. The board just needs to have disclosure on, this is a large purchase, we did or did not. If it's an item, the board knows we did some competitive bidding process. But if it's a service, we've not had that clarity for the board moving forward. I think from now on, if it's a service, something that either spans a large amount of time, touches a lot of students, staff, or sites, or is an exorbitant amount of money, the board needs to be able to say, and our professional judgment would be to say, I think the board's going to want some sort of competitive process or a written justification why we didn't do so.
Okay. So
we need to make sure that we make that price high enough that this doesn't become too burdensome and it doesn't delay day-to-day activities.
So is that something that we can look at? If you had to think of something, and I know this is completely out of the realm of what you do personally, but what would be something that you would think would be a price?
Well, I said earlier 50,000, but I'm just.
What about you, Laura? I mean, you've had this
throwing it up in the air.
Department heads.
Well, I mean, I think there's so many smaller things that they do that, I mean, yes, we finally look at, but we don't want them to hold up progress and us to have to look at all of those. So I don't know. I mean, I'd like Ms. Ellis and actually all the department heads to look at it and see what they think a good threshold number might be.
Definitely.
Let them recommend what they think.
Yeah.
That's what the next step would be.
Yes.
The 50,000 is what, in the Public Competitive Bidding Act, the 50,000 is the threshold where you have to go out to competitive bid, and it's been there for a while, but I think the point about it, we need to get the input from each of the department heads, but that's been a pretty, as far as those kind of situations, it's been a pretty good benchmark to
Yeah, that's where I got it. I didn't really just come out of my.
Well, here, I thought just, okay, I agree with that, because I'm with Lori. I don't want anybody to hold something up because they have to bring it to us when it could just have been something that could have been taken care of.
My only comment on this is on the point of when price is the most significant determinant, local bidders should receive a 5% preference. I absolutely understand the gist behind it, but I don't know when you would distinguish when is it the most significant determinant or not. Like, price is always going to be a significant determinant, so
When is it
can it be more black and white? Do you know what I
offering the
mean?
exact same thing, basically.
Right.
local bidder gets the first.
And that's the difficulty with an RFP, with a process. It's not if we're buying laptops, we can compare apples to apples.
For sure.
But RFPs quite often compare apples to pears to oranges, and we have to make a decision which is going to be best. And so we're just really not trying to nail down the process or limit staff so much as trying to say, if it's above this amount or this scope, we really need some sort of documented competitive process for the board to be sure is in place. That's the difficulty.
Case by case, kind of subjective.
Yeah, we need to be able to justify sometimes our decisions.
Yeah.
And that way, once the board makes the decision, the board's confident, well, this has been through a competitive process of some level.
Well, it
might be as simple as just getting quotes.
Right, and it can almost be that, I mean, there's just no significant value to this other one, and this is local, and just as simple as that.
It's usually, once you get people to put their best foot forward and lay out a plan, it's kind of like the CMARs. Once we did the construction managers, a request for proposal, request for qualifications for architects, it became pretty clear to the group that it was down to two. It was a choice between two companies, and so it's not much different than that.
Mr. Jester, historically, the requirement about local, what is local has been an issue, and this is going back before your time, Dr. Deegan, where we've had a couple of situations where that's been a legitimate inquiry. How do you define local?
How do we define it?
What local is?
City of Lawton or broader, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know, Southwest Oklahoma. Yeah, Comanche County, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's, that does leave things a little open.
It's been city, the city
Had to have a local address.
Basically, the address needs to have its, of course,
it was.
there are a lot of people that might have a post office box address in Lawton and say that they get their mail there, but, you know, is that just a means of getting in the door and having the benefit of that 5%, you know?
I would say no.
Well, and I know that Dr. Deegan has monitored that in the past.
We had a situation 2 years ago where it came down between two bidders, one local actually visited a site, wouldn't be home. So that pretty much solved it for us.
They have to have a verifiable business.
Yeah.
But that's where staff determines that they weren't.
We're saying local has to be going on.
You've got to police those kind of situations.
I don't think it's ever been defined, and one of the reasons it's never been defined, it's really hard to define.
Yeah, because some of the bigger companies have outlying.
Yeah, do they have staff that work here?
Yeah,
Is it in Elgin?
It's a moving
Is it
target.
within 30 miles, you know?
But the point is that you're trying to not nail down every last thing like that anyway, because you want it to be right.
And again, it's an opportunity to make sure that we have some sort of documentable, repeatable process that the board can be confident, you know. If there's a question after the meeting, we'll be able to say, produce that. And I think that's something that probably needs to happen when we spend a lot of the public's money.
I think so too. I really feel that's
Great.
true.
Thank you, it's a good start.
Okay.
Well,
All right, so we're going to table that?
we will take that information and we'll try to have a draft copy to the board
Oh, okay.
at the next meeting.
All right, very good.
Any further questions on that? I'll move on to item 7C. Superintendent's announcements. I already mentioned the dates to remember. I want to also, board members have at your table a timeline with the end of the year events, graduation, LPS. They have an LPS event at the Apache Event Center. Also, the groundbreaking for Eisenhower Middle School and the safe rooms. But I also want to mention that last week, all secondary LPS football teams received free football cleats through the Cleats for Kids program started by the McDaniel family.
Wow.
We've partnered with Under Armour to donate new cleats. It's an amazing number of cleats. Mr. Dees actually told me the exact number that we received. It's a huge deal, huge deal. So I want to thank Mr. Dees for, I don't know if he's in the room, but for pursuing that. He actually had to go to the city and participate in that, so I appreciate him doing that. Otherwise, my only one quick announcement is I'm a terrible judge of time. I told you all 20 minutes. I didn't mean to lie. We have members of our MacArthur High School archery team. Am I correct? Yes. And they are here eagerly awaiting to see what the consent agenda result is. Because they have a trip in the consent agenda. But I want to thank you all for coming and apologize for giving you a little bit, I'm terrible with time, just ask my wife. But thank you all for coming, and thank you students for putting your time in. It shows how much you really want to have this trip, so no pressure.
So the date for celebration, that is our Teacher of the Year rescheduled? You had mentioned that might be before a board meeting?
Yes, it mentioned Monday, May 14th. It'll still be before a board meeting, but 3 days before a board meeting.
Oh, so we did reschedule?
Yes. So,
In other words, we're not having a separate celebration.
yes, a separate celebration. We couldn't fit it together.
That's
so.
okay, that's okay. I just don't want to miss it, so.
Okay, so that concludes my announcements.
We'll move on to item 8. Does anyone have anything they need removed from the consent agenda?
I have a question on of our increases.
Okay, well, let's pull that one. And
Okay.
which item?
It is 8C1.
Okay.
Item 8C1.
Okay.
Someone like to make
I'd
a
like to move for the balance of the consent agenda.
Second.
call the roll, please?
Ms. Clotfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
8C1.
We've got quite a large increase. Are you ready for it?
Yes.
Okay. We've got quite a large increase in our,
Thank you.
our attorneys, and that's just the legal fees. Is there something else we need to know about that, or something I've missed, maybe?
RFR?
Wait a minute until they leave. They
Yeah.
can't-
Oh, okay.
They can't hear what you're saying.
Yes.
Have fun on your trip, by the way.
Yes, good luck.
Do good.
Where are they going? I missed that. Oh.
The last time they went on the trip, there was a bus caught on fire, so they've been waiting for a while to have a second chance.
They're so excited.
Good deal.
Move it in that.
Okay, Ms. Clotfelter.
Okay. My question, where we have the increase in our purchase orders and stuff, and I just noticed we had a $50,000 increase in our lawsuit for freedom. And since I've been sick and out of context just a little bit, maybe I've missed something. It seems like quite a jump.
There are probably a couple things. One thing that the most recent development, without getting into the legal issues,
Right.
is they determined that one of the developments actually now our insurance is no longer able to pay.
Okay, and how come is that?
I
Can we
think
tell
that would
that?
probably be a longer legal discussion. I can,
Yeah, because I would like, because I did see that, and I needed to come back to it, and I wondered why. That, if it was just like a cap or something.
I would be glad to, I didn't bring those notes with me.
Okay.
And I'm not, as far as the merits of that, essentially, one of the developments in the case eliminated our ability to
Right.
use insurance in the
Oh.
future on that
Okay.
case.
All right.
So whereas insurance is paying a portion, insurance is not paying a portion anymore.
Okay.
So that's part of it. Part of it is just a lot of work.
Well, I knew
And
that.
it's kind of
but
hard to.
I'm in the wrong
to judge
business.
it. Yeah.
Obviously. Okay, that's what my question was.
So I'm,
So you want to move to approve it?
Yeah, and we do seem like it was quite a bit of miss on this Midwest bus sales on their accident, additional damage. I mean,
Well, they got it
$16,000 is a big jump. I mean,
I could ask
On the
Mr.
bus,
Cook if he would like to. Oh,
what happened?
I have checked with him.
Okay. All right, well, I mean, we need to prove it's good.
Probably.
We need to go ahead, but I'd like to know I mean, because that's over double of what the original price was. Okay. All right, okay, well,
You want to move for the
I move to go ahead and approve this additional item 8C1 for approval.
second?
Call the roll, please?
Ms. Clotfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Okay, I need to skip way down here.
and Ms. Nyworth, I hope my comment about the event being before a board meeting was not inappropriate.
That's all right. I just want to be sure.
I'm tired today. I apologize.
I'm giving away tickets, and I want to be sure I'm there.
I apologize.
Teacher of the Year.
Well, we don't have to pay for that.
No, the orchestra gives them too.
Do we have to pay for that? We don't pay for that.
We have a proposed executive session. I believe we need to have one.
Yes.
Entertain a motion.
I say that we go into executive session.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
We make a second.
Lawton?
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Lori and Patty.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Statement of executive session minute for May 7, 2018. The Board of Education went into executive session at 5:50 p.m. Members present included Kent Jester, President, Carla Clodfelter, Vice President, Patty Nyworth, Kelly Edwards, Dr. Lori Bridges. Others present included Tom Deegan, Superintendent. Items discussed included personnel transactions as listed on the certified and support personnel reports, the selection of elementary assistant principal, the selection of elementary assistant principal in training, the selection of middle school assistant principal 10-month, the selection of middle school assistant principal 12-month, the selection of high school assistant principal 10-month, the selection of high school assistant principal 12-month, the pre-evaluation conference of Superintendent Deegan. During the executive session, the board discussed these items and no other items, and no action was taken. The board returned to open session at 7:10 p.m. This constitutes the minutes of the executive session. Okay, let's see where we're at here. Superintendent's personnel report.
Under item 13, I have item 13A, which is approval of the certified and support personnel reports.
Move for approval.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Under item 13B, I have the approval of the selection of elementary assistant principal, and for this position, I recommend Ms. Brenda Walker.
Move for approval. Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Under item 13C, approval of the selection of elementary assistant principal in training, I actually have 4 people for this position, and I recommend Andrea Hartzog, Sarah Calderon, Megan Johnson, and Haley Crow.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Under item 13D, approval of the selection of middle school assistant principal, 10-month, and for this position, I recommend Ms. Alyssa Henley.
Move for approval. Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Item 13E, approval of the selection of middle school assistant principal, 12-month position, and for this position, I recommend Mr. Rodney Lee.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Call the roll.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Under item 13F, approval of the selection of high school assistant principal, 10-month. I have 2 positions for this, 2 recommendations. I have Miss Andrea Tracy and Mr. Nick Mims.
Move for approval.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
And for item 13G, approval of the selection of high school assistant principal. This is a 12-month position. I have 2 recommendations as well. We have Mr. Gerald Tony Jones and Miss Susan Jones.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Okay.
And item 13H.
No action required on item 13H. Item 14, new business. Do we have any new business?
I have none that I can foresee.
Okay. Next regular board meeting date's Thursday, May 17th at 5 p.m. here. Do we need to set any other board meeting dates? We do, actually. I think we're going to have a special workshop type board meeting for May 29th at 5 p.m. at Lawton Marketing. Board announcements.
I'll get that to you. We'll get all the information to you.
Board announcement?
I don't have any announcements.
Showcase.
Showcase.
And I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Clodfelter?
Yes.
Ms. Nyworth?
Yes.
Dr. Bridges?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.